To the last breath of this movie based on a real-life incident. Chris is a diver. This is also one of the most dangerous occupations in the world. He is repair the pipeline at the bottom of the sea in the North Sea. Before the mission, the divers had to stay in the pressure chamber on the ship. The pressure chamber simulates the pressure environment at the bottom of the sea, which is about 300 feet deep. This mission was attended by 9 divers. Each 3 people took turns in a small team. Chris, Duncan, and the diver doctor were divided into a team. After the divers entered the pressure chamber, the staff on the ship closed the cabin door for them from the outside. Then the captain of the underwater team, Craig, was instantly extinguished, and the propeller on Chris's side was almost completely broken. The doctor, who climbed over with a weak light on his helmet, finally returned to the hotel by using the light bulb to search at the bottom of the sea in the dark. Then he used his strength to grab a wall full of holes and climbed up. In the end, under the instinct of extreme survival, he climbed on the top of the iron wire net of eyes weakly and passed out. Soon after, the captain and aft manually operated the propeller engine and arrived near the diving point. The crew found Chris at the top of the hotel by using the remote control submersible. At this time, Chris's spare oxygen tank had run out for 7. At the bottom of the remote control submersible, they saw Chris hooking a buckle on the wire mesh before he fainted. On the other hand, Duncan in the submersible has been out of touch for a long time but couldn't find any of the bodies of one of the crew members. In the end, the ship company decided not to spend any more money to continue the search. Later, the ship company cleaned up the storage cabinet of this crew member and put some of it in a shoebox for the crew member's wife. Souvenirs. I'm not giving more eggs than she wants. You won't. Just when the two of them were talking, the engineer on the ship reawakened his professional skills. He successfully repaired the dynamic positioning system by replacing the slow operation of the restart system with a physical method. When the ship switched to automatic navigation mode, all the facilities in the submersible returned to normal. The control room also got in touch with Duncan. Next, the doctor went down again then he dragged Chris to the direction of the submersible. But suddenly, there was a surge of water on the surface of. The captain terminated the repair mission at the bottom of the sea. Let the ship return to the port. When Chris went into the decompression chamber to rest, the doctor checked Chris's body. All indicators were normal. 3 days later, Chris returned to Scotland. Aberdeen met his fiancée. Like, comment, and subscribe for more amazing tales.